This is Family in Focus with Dr. Wendy Schofer, episode number 113. Welcome back. So good to have you here. We're going to dive right in with an acknowledgement. Parenting is no joke. It's really freaking hard. And then kids just don't understand what it is that we're doing as we're doing our very best to try to raise them and to raise them to be healthy and happy and productive members of society. Today, we're going to go through an exercise that I've found really makes it so much easier to parent. And here's what it is: define your values. I know this is something that we never learned in any kind of parenting 101. It's really overdue. We've always been told what it is that we need to do, but not to understand why it is that we do things. Values are, the things that we hold really important. They are our guiding light. They're the why we do the things that we do, and also why we don't do things. Do we value it? Do we not value it? But not just the value tied to it. What does it mean to me? So, what are your values specific around raising your family? I'm going to let you think about it for a moment. Think about it. What is important? What are your values? Not necessarily defining it, but just kind of thinking about like what are maybe 5 or 10 words that come up about what is important to you as you are raising your family. Once you have those, I want you to think about the rules that you have in your home, maybe the areas around which you have rules. So in our house, we have rules that I would put into the bucket of safety or electronics, food, movement, social interactions, relationships, that kind of stuff. So just thinking about the general kind of classes of areas where there's kind of like some house rules. How are those rules tied to your values? So let's take a couple of examples. For one, I value safety. This wasn't one that came up right away when I thought about my list of values, but I recognize how important it is, and it is infused within so many of the decisions that I have made as a parent. And when I think about that value of safety, it's because I think about certain rules in our house. So, for one, as a general rule, my husband and I agreed we would never have a backyard pool. We would never have a trampoline. That's just what we agreed upon from a safety perspective. We always, always, always buckle up when we are in a car. We always wear helmets when we're on bicycles. So no matter how far we're going, we are taking these safety measures. And these rules are things that I say always, always, always. Those rules aren't moving anywhere because there's a solid why for us: the value of safety. These are tied to a value that we want to instill in our kids, and there are ones that we are practicing, a value that we are practicing every single day. And noticing, as I'm going back and thinking about that value of safety, there's not been any kind of negotiation. So it wasn't something where the kids could beg repeatedly until I would suddenly say, you know what, we don't need to use the car seat without buckling today. Oh, we can just drive away without buckling up. It was not something that even existed. I had a value, and put into action, it meant buckling up every single time. And I created the rules with boundaries around them. If we don't buckle, then the car is not moving. If you don't put on your helmet, you're not getting on your bike. And then, along came electronics. And I will highlight, as I think about the example with electronics and the rules that we have in our house, that we can make our values whatever it is that we want. Okay. So you notice I didn't give you a list of values. You can identify what's important to you. In this case, I'm going to highlight my value of sleep. Absolutely. Okay. With electronics, I needed some help with my parental extension because my children, let's just say that they didn't have the same sleep schedules that I do, and they didn't necessarily have the same values around electronics that I did. And I realized that as I'm using this example, that I'm dating myself a little bit with the tech that I'm describing, but you can see how it applies to you in this day and age. Um, this example is a couple of years ago. So I used a Wi-Fi blocker that would shut down electronics in my house at a certain time. And that was a rule, it was an extension, it was a boundary that I created, basically saying that electronics would be shut off at a particular time. If you didn't shut them off, the Wi-Fi would go down. And it was something to be able to help instill that value of reminding everyone, by the way, it's time for sleep. It's time for sleep. And of course, gonna notice the kids didn't have the same values as me. They didn't agree. They tried bargaining and negotiating and fussing and oh, the colorful stories of trying to circumvent the system. And it didn't work. What didn't work was all of the fussing and negotiation. I had created a boundary for myself as well as extending it for them. Electronics were off at a certain hour. And then they could have all of the emotions, they could have all of the response. It was fine. And I kept on reminding myself of that over and over again. Of course, they're not appreciating my value, my boundary, my rule right now. But because that rule, because that boundary was based in a value that was so important to me, it was coming back to the value of sleep. Well, that was all that mattered. It removed the emotional charge. The kids could have all of the emotions, but for me, it was like, this is a given because it was based in my values. I think that's really a big thing to notice that our kids' values are not necessarily the same as ours. And that's okay. Well, I'm trying to instill in them my value system because I mean, that's part of parenting. That's part of raising our children. And we're sharing that extension of ourselves in our value system. And yet, it doesn't always look that way. And that's part of the process. And I think that this is where, let's just say that parenting gets really fun. We get to parent in a style that fits our family. And we also get to recognize the role that we play as leaders in our families. Leaders do hard things. Well, that's by definition what parenting is. It's not just a walk in the park, but we can make the hard easy, easier, and fun, still acknowledging that we are doing things that are life's work. Things that are life's work aren't easy. It takes a lifetime to do this, and that's parenting, raising the next generation. So when I come back to this, we're really when we live according to our values, boundaries and rules get easier to maintain, along with the work of understanding that we can't just dial in what our kids' emotional experience is going to be. And that's okay. They're going to have their own responses. But when we come back to our values and why we're doing it this way, I think of values helping us understand our why. It's our North Star. And that's when things get easier, when we are working with our values, because things just seem to align. And the first step is just getting to understand our own values. So let me know what's coming up for you. As always, this is an invitation to have a dialogue. Drop me a line. I want to know, what are your values? What's coming up for you as you are living, according to your values? What's getting in the way with living according to your values as you're raising your family? As always, it's in the show notes. So Wendy at wendychauffeurmd.com. All right, I'll see you soon.